You're mentioning of demand management. Is there a way of ranking cities in terms of parking demand? In Boulder, where you may have physical constraints to having suburban sprawl, or you've got universities, you've got hospitals. Boise, you've got the state government in place that are creating demand for parking, and perhaps Boulder driving it upwards. Whereas in Fort Wayne, certainly at least one real estate analysis in terms of the density of office use in Fort Wayne is not particularly good news. The office vacancy rate in downtown is kind of going in the wrong direction. Other than Harrison Square opening, is Fort Wayne having a lessening of demand, or where do we rate in terms of other cities?
Well, I don't really think I have the answer to that. Greg, do you have any sense of that one in terms of where the overall economy and office vacancy?
The statistics that you're listing about office vacancies and so forth are undeniable. I don't know how many more people come downtown for services that are an hour apart, whether it's the Justice Center or attorneys. I don't know. I don't think we've studied that recently to know which direction it's going in at what pace. But it's a good question.
What are the monthly parking rates, just out of curiosity?
Gary, you got it.
Well, I think the issue, Mitch, isn't necessarily the demand. Probably the total inventory right now is probably adequate for our needs. It's the management and edification and direction of to where these spaces are available when. And for those of us who are charged with promoting our facilities as well as downtown, parking is the first and last impression people make of their trips to downtown, and it's being able to identify where those spaces are available when they're coming in and make it so that they can leave in a simple manner. So it's not really the demand right now. I think it's the management, although we hope to make demand an issue in the future.
Well, I understand that, but there are pressures coming on in the next few years that I think are even going to lessen demand. Something kind of surprising to folks who don't think about it is that the Indiana Supreme Court now has standards moving out to the counties on computerization of county clerks and court systems, where in the state court system, attorneys will be able to do electronic filing of documents and checking dockets as they do in the federal system. There will not be the need for attorneys' offices to be located within a few blocks of the courthouse. When that occurs, we'll see, I think, in Fort Wayne possibly the trend of law offices leaving the central city, as we've seen the major accounting firms doing so. And if we've got adequate capacity now, and we may have a system of overcapacity in the near future, if you have increased pricing trying to get folks into parking structures, do we have an economic situation where higher parking costs are going to cause folks to look for cheaper parking on the periphery? Are we in a situation that's the opposite of Boulder, Colorado?
Well,
and how do we address that?
It's an interesting thought. I mean, but there are some basic principles regarding pricing of parking that I think is important to keep in mind. And that your on-street spaces are your most valuable assets. They're the most convenient to the businesses downtown. And you really want to try to make those available for short-term parking as much as possible, so that there's a perception that there is parking. If all the spaces are full when somebody drives through, they get the impression that everything is taken up. And if they see a shop they're interested in, if they could just pull over, they might just pull over. If not, they'll just keep on going. And if you're going to be here for a longer period of time, you need the information out there where longer-term parking assets are. And if you're in a situation where you're trying to stimulate more activity downtown and to stimulate some demand, I mean, you might think about, this is the idea of parking as an economic development stimulus. You might develop parking in an area where you don't have demand to try to stimulate demand in that area. Boise's used that as a strategy so effectively that they are at the tipping point now where they're changing their strategy. And they're on Forbes' like #1 place to do business in the country list. They're basically telling developers, we're glad you're here in Boise, take a number, we'll get to you. Oh, by the way, whereas we used to provide parking, just throw it at you. Here are our design standards that you would have to provide parking to our new standards, because we're trying to keep our urban design standards up to code and all those kind of things. So they're actually at a point of where but they did use that as a strategy before. The first hour free was a way to get people downtown. If perception of a parking problem was one of the things that kept people from the county from ever coming downtown, just check out the restaurants that are available downtown and the interesting shops that are only available downtown that aren't the same thing you see at every mall you go to everywhere in the world. Try to make that, parking is not, people don't come downtown to park. They come down for other reasons. But parking can be a good excuse in people's minds not to come downtown. So using parking as a way to kind of get around that initial reticence and be more with marketing and first hour free programs and those kind of strategies is an interesting idea in terms of how we can leverage parking to make us more, again, help us accomplish other things. And if we want to get more people downtown, and if you have a glut of parking, that might be an advantage to use in trying to go out and lease out some of this office space. I mean, that's something that you could use as a strategic advantage if that's the position you happen to be in. So it's just basically understanding your position and then how can we use parking as a strategic tool to help us achieve whatever the goals are depending on where we are. So.
I'd like to emphasize that whatever situation we have in Fort Wayne, a strategy to dealing with it. It could be that we have too much supply. There's a way to deal with it. It could be that we have a perception that there's no parking downtown, which many people cling to, that there's no parking downtown when I do come downtown. Whatever the situation is, a strategy to deal with it is what a parking authority ought to be dealing with. That should be their task.
I do think that just understanding the community and being very sensitive to community needs. I mean, there are specific issues for retailers, there are specific issues for large employers and small employers and restaurants. If you're a restaurant owner downtown and your employees have to pay for parking and they get off at 11 o'clock and most of them are females and they're walking 4 blocks to a dark parking lot, that's a really specific issue that we might be able to address with some kind of specific program if we're really sensitive and tuned into that, because those employees are, well, they were in short demand, they may be less demand now, but and when you say, well, you can work for me downtown for this amount or you can work out here at Applebee's and parking's free, a lot of times that makes the decision for where that person's going to work. So
J.K. O'Donnell's took care of that for themselves. They leased that space. And it would be nice for another restaurant owner to have a centralized place to go saying, I'd like to invest in this kind of activity downtown. How can I make this happen? And have the expertise available to work with them. Right now, that Scott Glaze had to do it on his own. But if you had a group of people or an organization that was charged with doing that, then people would know where to go.
Boise is looking right now, they're asking me for examples of, given the state of the economy and given the state of businesses downtown right now, and they're trying to be a little bit sensitive, especially since they just raised rates. They were thrilled, actually, they got their rate increase passed before the economy went down. But now they're looking to say, we feel some responsibility to try to be sensitive to the needs of downtown. So they're thinking about programs that could, explore downtown free shopping days in December or something to kind of help promote downtown businesses and make people come downtown. And just one way that the parking system can contribute to a larger goal of really retaining and recruiting new business downtown. So it's interesting. There's a million different things you can do.